What if I told you that some of Hollywood's biggest names, the kind of people who can buy entire islands or penthouses overlooking Paris, are slipping quietly into the Philippines? Not for quick vacations, not for business deals. They're moving here to stay. Imagine that. Instead of Malibu, Lake Como, or the south of France, you'll find them in Palawan, Siargao, or in the breezy hills of Tagaytay. They're sipping kapeng barako, greeting their neighbours, and walking barefoot along sleepy beach roads with no bodyguards, no flashing cameras, nothing but the rhythm of daily life. These are A-list celebrities, Oscar winners, faces you've only seen on giant cinema screens and glossy magazines, now tucked away in quiet Filipino towns. Some are picking up Tagalog from their kasambahay, falling in love with the aroma of tinola, even tearing up during Sunday Mass sung by a children's choir. One unforgettable moment, captured on a small fan blog months ago, showed exactly why this story matters. A major American actor, known worldwide for tough guy roles and explosive blockbusters, was seen crying silently in a church in Bohol. No wedding, no funeral. It was a normal Sunday service, surrounded by locals. No fanfare, no entourage. Later, when asked why, he explained, "I've stepped into hundreds of churches, but none gave me this kind of peace." So what's happening here? Why are people who built their lives on red carpets, million-dollar chefs, and palatial homes flying to the Philippines for something money can't reach? To answer that, let me tell you about one man. His name won't ring out like Tom Cruise or Leonardo DiCaprio, but in Hollywood circles, everyone knows him. A fixer, a producer, the kind of person who makes big films possible without ever appearing on the poster. His name is Daniel. He helped bring the biggest action hits of the 2000s to life, made his millions, traveled the globe. But underneath it all, Daniel was exhausted. He had the parties, the premieres, the homes, the cars, everything. And still, the more he traveled, the more the world blurred into one polished, expensive, but strangely empty loop. During a shoot in Bangkok, a young Filipino cinematographer kept showing him photos. Surf breaks in Siargao, sunset roads lined with palms, kids outside sari-sari stores. "You'll feel something there," the cinematographer told him. "It's not like anywhere else. Go see for yourself." Daniel laughed it off. Spiritual nonsense, he thought. But months later, with no plans and an ache in his chest he couldn't explain, he booked a flight. What he found in the Philippines wasn't only breathtaking beauty, though the country delivers that in endless waves. It was something deeper, something that wrapped around him like home, even before he could name it. A tricycle driver in Cebu refused to overcharge him because he was a guest. A family in Davao invited him to Christmas dinner minutes after meeting him in a cafe. Children waved at him in the streets, not because of fame, but because he was simply there. A week stretched into a month, then half a year. Eventually, he bought a small house in Siargao. 2 bedrooms, close enough to the sea that the sound of waves carried him to sleep. No alarms, no assistance. Daniel and the island, and for the first time in decades, he felt himself healing. Soon, word spread among his circle. Directors, set designers, actors who had seen the highs and lows of fame came to visit. Some stayed a few days, others never left. They'd ask him, "How do you live like this? Is it safe?" Daniel would smile and answer, "It's not about safety. It's about soul." What he found, and what they started to discover, was something most of them never realized they were missing. A world where people meet each other's eyes, where neighbors help without being asked. Where it doesn't matter if you're a millionaire or a janitor, as long as you say Po and Salamat. One evening, under string lights in Daniel's backyard, with grilled fish and calamansi juice on the table, a Hollywood actress leaned back barefoot and whispered, "I haven't felt this human in years." That could have been the end of it. A handful of stars escaping the roar of Hollywood for something quieter. But it wasn't. Something bigger began. They started bringing the Philippines back with them. Not souvenirs, not photos, but ideas, feelings, a hunger for connection, for values not built on fame, but on faith, family, and bayanihan. They shared it with friends. Their friends shared it again. And before long, a quiet migration formed. Not of stars chasing headlines, but of people who had spent their entire lives under the spotlight, now searching for comfort in the shadows. Under mango trees and mountain fog, singing karaoke in the provinces, riding long jeepney trips, living in places where the heart, at last, could rest. For Daniel, what happened in the Philippines wasn't a discovery. It was the start of something. Because the real reason more and more Hollywood actors are buying homes here isn't simply the islands. It's the people. Something in Filipinos reminded them, beautifully and painfully, of a humanity they thought they had lost. That changes everything. When Daniel first bought his small house in Siargao, he didn't believe he was making a life choice. He thought it was a pause, a reset, something temporary, an escape. But life had other plans. It began quietly, like morning light slipping through a bamboo window. He noticed he wasn't waking up in panic anymore. His hands no longer reached for a phone before his eyes were even open. The tension his body had carried for decades was unwinding. He slept deeper, laughed louder, ate slower. Coffee on the porch became a ritual. He waved at kids riding by on rusted bikes. He let the ocean sing louder than any playlist. And one morning, when the old man selling Tahoe called him Anak, Daniel realized he belonged. He wasn't a guest anymore. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, the people Daniel used to work with, actors who lived on jets and rented entire hotel floors, were starting to feel their own emptiness. The pandemic years cracked something open. Isolation made them ask questions they had avoided for too long. What's the point of all this? Why does success feel lonely? And what if disappearing wasn't losing, but finding? That's how Jenna arrived. For years, she was everywhere. A blockbuster darling, a scandal magnet, one of the most photographed women in Hollywood. Then she vanished. No farewell tour, no interviews, silence. Behind the scenes, she had been watching Daniel, reading his emails, seeing his photos, a barefoot life, a freer life. It pulled at her, nostalgic, painful, real. She booked a flight under another name, landed in Manila with a backpack, and never turned back. Her first stop wasn't the beaches. It was north, to Banao. She had seen the rice terraces in a documentary once, dreamt of standing there among the mist and stone. She made the trip by bus, 8 hours, one flat tire, and all her doubts packed together. But when she finally reached the green stairways carved into the mountains, she broke down in tears. Not only because of the beauty, though it was overwhelming, but because no one cared who she was. No selfies, no whispers, no cameras. She was another weary traveller in muddy sneakers. That anonymity didn't feel like loss. It felt like freedom. Weeks turned into months. Batangas, Bohol, Bukidnon. But in Dumaguete, something settled. That coastal town gave her the quiet she'd always searched for. People were curious, yes, but never invasive. They cared less about who she had been, more about who she was becoming. She found a house by the sea, shaded with acacia trees, close to the market where she could walk barefoot at dawn. There, she learned to cook sinigang from her landlady, joined Bible studies in Visayan, and started writing again, not scripts, but letters to herself. Jenna's story, like Daniel's, wasn't about escape. It was about reflection. The Philippines had become a mirror, not one that flatters, but one that strips you back to the human core. And then came others. Another actor, famous for superhero roles, slipped into a barangay unannounced. Locals knew him only as Kuya Jim, the tall guy who bought pandesal for kids and helped with cleanups. He stayed 3 months, came back with his wife, and bought land in Camiguin. This movement isn't about running from the US, taxes, or politics. That's the assumption outsiders make. But it's wrong. These people aren't fleeing. They're returning to something they didn't know they lost: groundedness, a rhythm of life that doesn't rush, a culture where generosity is instinct, laughter is easy, and worth is measured by kindness, not contracts. Daniel once put it best: Hollywood trains you to chase. The Philippines taught me to stay, to sit still, to love what I already have. Today, Daniel lives in a forever home he built farther inland, where carabaos wander by each morning. And here's the twist: you wouldn't believe who helped him build it. Locals, of course, but also a former Emmy-winning director, a costume designer from Vancouver, a stuntman from New York. All Hollywood, all friends, all now living or planning to live here in the Philippines. They didn't hire workers. They laid the wood themselves. They shared meals during construction, celebrating milestones not with champagne, but with lechon and karaoke. It was messy, it was imperfect, yet it was real. Because the Philippines is becoming more than a place on a map. For those who have spent too long in the noise, it's turning into a village, a home where souls finally exhale. By the time Daniel's new house was finished, the quiet ripple had grown. What started with a handful of Hollywood names settling into hidden corners of the country was slowly forming a silent movement, unseen in headlines but powerful in spirit. They didn't arrive with fanfare, no interviews, no press releases. They arrived like neighbors. Some came to heal, others to hide, most to belong. Take Peter, a screenwriter who once wrote billion-dollar comedies and dramas, yet fame left him hollow. A typhoon rerouted his flight to Cebu, where he stumbled into a tiny eatery. A bowl of arroz caldo, a woman named Marisa, and a kindness that asked for nothing. That moment changed him. He never boarded his next flight. He stayed, wrote for himself again, and said his words felt honest for the first time in 20 years. That's what the Philippines reminds people. Stories don't need to be loud to be powerful. Life doesn't need paparazzi. It needs laughter in kitchens and umbrellas shared during rain. Even those used to speed and spotlight slow down here. They notice the smell of rice at dusk, the roosters at dawn, the kids shouting "Tay" as their father rides home. They notice prayers whispered before meals, and neighbors who ask not what you do, but if you've eaten. For Hollywood's weary, this was the shock of kindness. Not royalty, not freaks, neighbors. Family they never knew they had. And with that came responsibility. Daniel started funding scholarships in Siargao. Jenna built a center for single mothers in Negros. Peter taught free writing classes in Cebu. Quiet generosity, rooted in utang na loob, a sacred debt of gratitude paid with the heart. Because the Philippines doesn't ask you to be perfect. It doesn't need you to be famous. It asks you to show up, to share what you can, and accept what's given back. And in that exchange, they found meaning. Daniel once said in a radio interview, "In LA, everyone asks who you know. Here, people want to know who you are when the lights go out." That's the truth they were chasing. Not fame, not fortune, but wholeness. The kind that comes from sitting with a stranger in silence and realizing peace doesn't need words. So yes, it may sound strange. Stars moving to the Philippines, buying homes in hidden towns, speaking broken Tagalog, singing karaoke in slippers. But maybe it makes perfect sense, because in a world spinning too fast, they found a place that finally lets them slow down. By now, you may be wondering, if all of this is true, why don't we see it in the headlines? Why no viral clips of celebrities at wet markets or basketball courts in Nueva Ecija? That's exactly the point. They're not performing anymore. They're living. And here, life isn't broadcast, it's shared, moment by moment, meal by meal. One story sums it up. A grey-haired American moved to a lakeside bungalow in Laguna. He called himself Paul, volunteered at the chapel, joined cleanups, handed snacks to night patrols. Locals later discovered he was a beloved TV cowboy from the 70s. When asked why he stayed, he said, "In America, I spent my life pretending to be someone else. Here, I get to be me." That's what they were all seeking. Daniel, Jenna, Peter, Paul. Not escape, not luxury. A return to themselves. Because the Philippines doesn't try to impress. It simply exists, raw, chaotic, beautiful, full of heart. And if you slow down, you'll see it. Life is more than applause. Sometimes the greatest applause is hot lugaw on a rainy morning, a child calling you Tito, a stranger handing you an umbrella. These moments may never trend online, but for those who've lived too long under the spotlight, they are everything. And so, Hollywood isn't only buying homes in the Philippines, they're planting roots, raising families, starting schools, building futures. One actress chose to give birth in Iloilo, not for luxury, but for the warmth of the nurses. A director is funding a film school in Baguio, so Filipino talent can rise. This isn't about land. It's about soul. The world might call it a trend, a whim. But those who've been embraced by pakikizama, those who've prayed in a blackout, laughed through storms, sung through typhoons, know better. Because once you've been welcomed into this rhythm, you never truly leave. You may fly back to the States. You may film another blockbuster. But your heart stays here. With the vendor who calls you anak, the neighbor who asks if you've eaten, the child who waves when you walk by. And so, the answer is simple. Hollywood has found in the Philippines what the cameras never gave them. Not applause, but rebirth. A second chance at being human. And maybe that's what we were all searching for. Not a place to exist, but a place to finally feel at home. If this story moved you, imagine how many more are waiting to be told. Subscribe, hit the bell, and share your thoughts in the comments. Who knows? The next story might be yours.